University just turned away another little boy that had relapsed. I don't believe Emory University will even take you. You can go to Medical College of Charleston and talk with them, or you can go to St. Jude. And we looked at both and we decided to go to St. Jude. And I remember walking in at St. Jude and sitting down with the doctor. The AML doctor was there, his nurse practitioner, and just a clinic nurse. They were all three sitting there. And I remember him looking at me and saying, "Chad, at this stage in treatment, a lot of people decide just to go home and enjoy what time they have left. And if that is something that y'all want to do, nobody's going to hold that against you. Nobody will consider that a bad decision on your part." They said the majority of places in the country would not do a second transplant. But we will. We think we have some things we could offer. And so we agreed to that. And when we did, I was very happy with their response. They all smiled and said, "Well, good. We're glad. We think you made the right choice." And so we began the transplant process. And the first thing she had to do, she had to get a new line put in. And I was over here in Aiken working. And my phone rung, and I answered the phone. It was my wife, and my wife said, "Chad, I don't know what to tell you, but the doctor just came in and said they're doing everything they can for Cassidy, but they've run into a problem, and right now they're working on her." I said, "What does that mean, they're working on her?" And she says, "I don't know, but they look scared." And I said, "Well, call me back as soon as you know what's going on." So my wife called me back after probably 20 minutes and said 2 doctors just came out and talked to me. And she said it was scary. She said they were sweating, they were out of breath, they were red-faced. They said we nicked the main vein that goes into your daughter's heart. And she bled out into her chest. And her heart actually quit beating for about 3 minutes. And we've got her stabilized. But she's on a ventilator, and we're going to leave her in the operating room for the next hour, and we don't want it to break loose and her start bleeding again. And if she does start bleeding again, we're going to have to crack her chest open and try to repair whatever it is. And for the next 4 weeks, Cassidy was in the ICU. And during that time, I really had to trust the Lord, because when we went to St. Jude, 50% of her blood was leukemia. And it had been growing like super fast. And she was on a ventilator for 2 weeks, came off, and in ICU for another couple of weeks while her lung got better. And during that 4 weeks, her blood work never changed. During that 4 weeks, the leukemia got no worse. The doctors would come in and say, "It's amazing." Here we are. In a short time, 50% of her blood's leukemia, and now over the past 4 weeks, nothing has changed. Her blood counts have stayed the same. Her hemoglobin's not dropping. Her white counts aren't dropping. Her platelets aren't dropping. It's amazing. A few weeks later, the anesthesiologist who was in the room came to my wife and saw her in the hall and said, "Hey, can I talk with you for a moment?" She began to talk with her, and she told her, she said, "I was in the room with Cassidy whenever she quit bleeding, or when she started bleeding." She said, "I've only seen two people in all my years who've come back from the condition Cassidy was in." And she said, "Your daughter was one of them." And she said she was literally at the point where nobody in that room thought she was coming back. And she said whenever she did her heart started beating again, she said the one doctor in the room looked to the other doctor and said, "We didn't bring this child back. God brought this child back." Her last transplant, she had RSV. RSV is a lung infection, which for us is absolutely nothing but a cold. But for a child whose immune system has been suppressed, it a lot of times is deadly. And Cassidy got RSV, and they came to us and they said, "Cassidy has RSV. This is one of the worst viruses that she could have at the worst time in transplant she could have gotten." And for the next 3 to 4 weeks, we just sit and waited on her new immune system to come in. The doctors came to us and they said, "Here's what we fully expect to have happen. At the very least, we think that Cassidy will be in the ICU, quite possibly, if not probably, on a ventilator, and this could be what takes Cassidy's life. And, you know, I know I haven't shared much other than this. I want to share with you some things God's done in my life, but let me just pause right here and say this. God has been so good to me and my family through the years, and just seeing Him move and seeing Him perform miracles time and time again. That when the doctors came to us and said that, Jen and I, we began to talk, and we said, look, we're just going to pray. We're going to pray and we're going to trust God. And let me say, my God, the God of the Bible, is a trustworthy God. I mean, I trust Him I trust Him with my life. I trust Him with my eternity. The most that Cassie had to do was for about 2 weeks, she had to wear an oxygen. It's called a nasal cannula, and just get a very low dose of oxygen to keep her oxygen level up. Well, we came back. Everything once again was going well, and I preached in a church in Raleigh, and we had an appointment, our 6-month appointment. We went back for our 6-month appointment, and her platelets had been dropping, and sure enough, she had relapsed. And so we started getting ready. The doctors came to us. Half the team was in favor of us doing a transplant. Half of the team was not in favor of us doing a transplant. The head of the transplant unit sat down and talked with us, and he said, here's what my concern is. I'm concerned we're not extending her life. I'm concerned that we're shortening her life with this transplant. He said, she's gone through so many transplants. He says, there's no doubt in my mind we're the only place in the country that would do another transplant on Cassidy. He said, without this transplant, Cassidy will die. There's no doubt about it, she'll die. He goes, with this transplant, this is the only shot she has of beating this leukemia. And we began to pray, and you know, we didn't want to be selfish parents. We didn't want to be parents that put Cassidy through unneeded procedures just because we wanted her here. We really wanted to do what God wants to do, and we began to pray, and really felt that's what God wanted us to do, was to allow her to go through another transplant. And they came to us the day before the transplant and said, there's something new that you need to know. We tested, they do all these kind of tests, and they said we tested her pulmonary function. And due to the RSV, due to the bleeding out on the lung and that collapsed lung and being on the ventilator and all the chemo, Cassie's pulmonary function is only testing at a 50. They said a 40, we won't even do a transplant. A 40 to a 60, she's considered high risk for getting something with her lungs, an infection, and dying from some type of lung infection. And then he proceeded to tell us, explain to us in detail how bad a death was from a lack of oxygen.